I really appreciate the initiative taken by PhD Chamber of Commerce for a very, very vital issue of marginalized sections of society. I will be talking from a totally different perspective, basically a sort of sensitization, because it is most important. The first thing is, who are these marginalized people? Obviously SCs, STs, minorities including Muslims and Buddhists, then Shudras, that is OBCs. And their total extent in the total population is about 80 to 85%. And majority of them are deprived of basic right to development. Why? They are economically weak. Educationally and financially they are excluded. Socially they are discriminated. Recently we had example last week only in Gujarat. The 4 young boys were beaten mercilessly only because they were doing the job which was destined for them due to this graded caste structure. Then the most important thing is they are helplessly watching their traditional skills getting redundant. Why? Because of this globalization and mechanization and technological disruption. You will be surprised to know, long ago when Dr. Ambedkar had written that annihilation of caste, he had said about this technological disruption, I will just quote, graded caste system which developed over thousands of years had not yielded any positive distribution of work. So what he said, व्यवसायों का यह स्तरण जो जाति प्रथा का परिणाम है निश्चय ही घातक है। उद्योग कभी भी स्थिर नहीं होता, इसमें तेजी से और अचानक परिवर्तन होते हैं। ऐसे परिवर्तनों से व्यक्ति को अपना व्यवसाय बदलने की छूट होनी चाहिए। बदलती हुई परिस्थितियों के अनुसार व्यक्ति को अपने आप को ढालने की ऐसी स्वतंत्रता के बिना उसके लिए अपनी आजीविका कमाना असंभव हो जाएगा। जाति प्रथा हिंदुओं को ऐसे व्यवसाय अपनाने की अनुमति नहीं देगी जहां उनकी जरूरत है, यदि वे उन आनुवंशिक रूप से उनसे संबंधित नहीं है। This was said by Dr. Ambedkar long ago, and this is happening in front of our eyes. Because of this only, this majority of the population is getting marginalized. Now, what is this marginalization basically per se? In my view, it is basically exclusion from the process of development. And what is this mainstreaming? Mainstreaming is to provide opportunities to bring them in the system so that they can go for their all-round development. And when we consider about our constitution is a social document which basically aimed at establishing political democracy and social democracy. The political democracy was to be established through fundamental rights like this freedom of speech, freedom of association, etc., etc. And the social democracy was to be achieved through implementation of directive principles of state policy. Now what happened? We have utterly failed in establishing this social democracy. And because of that, we are finding these types of seminars and all these programs, and we are talking about this mainstreaming of the marginalized section of society. Because social justice is the soul of this social democracy. And what is this social justice? The right of every individual to live life with basic human dignity, to realize his potential by enhancing and utilizing his skills, capabilities, and the knowledge. In other words, social justice is nothing but the right to development. I will just quote Justice Bhagwati. He had said, right to development is one of the most important basic human rights, and it constitutes the culminating point of the evolution of the concept of human rights. And when he said, he had in mind the individual dimension of this right to development is concerned with the integral development of the individual in the sense of promoting his multi-dimensional fulfillment. What is this multi-dimensional fulfillment? सबसे पहले first this roti kapda और मकान, then security, So, job security, and then comes recognition, and then self-actualization. So this multi-dimensional fulfillment is basically has to be provided to the society. Opportunities for this. Our constitution aimed at that. Social democracy aimed at that. Justice Bhagwati had also stated what are the conditions to realize these. The first condition was effective access to tangible resources. What are these tangible resources? Sufficient nutrition, health care, hygiene, shelter, clothing, clean water, air, energy, etc., etc. Then effective access to intangible resources. What are these intangible resources? Education, quality education, technical training, access to information, and in today's context it is also ICT, information communication technology. And why these were necessary? Because these could only enable these marginalized sections of society to better utilize resources and freely participate in the process of development of the country. Now, in addition to this, he had also suggested that there have to be structures and production and governance, structures of production and governance to ensure fair and equitable allocation of these resources. In our constitution, the directive principles of state policy aimed at precisely this objective. I will come later on why we have failed. Now, he had also said that he did not believe in right to survive. He believed in right to live. Because every individual has a right to live with dignity. Right to survive, हजारों लोग, करोड़ों लोग आज की तारीख में अभिशप्त हैं इस देश के अंदर just to live. 2 वक्त की रोटी मिल जाए और जिंदा रहें जैसे तैसे करके. I will give you some data. This latest census data. 25 crore households are being used for habitation purpose in this country, and 40% of these are single room tenement without toilet and without kitchen. So 40% population means around 50 crore people. And the population of the country when we got freedom was less than that. 8 crore households have drinking water from treated resources, but remaining are dependent upon hand pumps, untreated resources, and others. Drainage, 51% households have drainage, only 18% are closed drains. 12 crore households have got toilet facility, it means remaining 13 crores don't have that. When it comes to nutrition, I had taken this data from UNICEF. 2008 to 2012, the 28% of the child who took birth were underweight. 7.5 million children every year take birth who are underweight. And the most glaring, most serious and pitiful position is in the education sector. Literacy though has improved, but we know 50% of the children in primary schools, this Sampark Foundation of Vineet Iyer had carried out survey, recently it appeared in newspapers. 50% children, they don't know how to count beyond 99, and we are talking about their financial inclusion. PISA, Program for International Students Assessment, is a program. They conduct this to assess the education capability, literacy capability of the students from 3 to 15 years old every 3 years. Our country doesn't participate in that, but in 2009, 2 states, Himachal Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, had participated. Result, they were at the bottom, just above Kyrgyzstan. And the government of India asked all the states not to participate. Health sector, 82% of the urban and 86% of the rural population are without any health cover. 57% urban and 70% rural population can't afford to go to doctors. Very high disease burden they have to carry. TB bacteria is carried by most of the population, more than 80% population, mostly these workers. And then we have this caste-based social discrimination. Although we have this Act, Prevention of Atrocities Act, The cases registered even today is increasing. In 2012, it was 39,512 cases. In 2014, it increased to 47,124. The number of cases decided by the courts disposal was 19,847 in 2014. Conviction rate is just 28%, and in Delhi it is only 14%. So all these things, what they indicate? They indicate a very, very horrible, grim situation in the country. Friends, I believe firmly the only country in the world which is capable of leading the world in all dimensions of economic and social development is this country, because of the natural endowment we have got. The second largest cultivable land capable of generating 3 crops a year. Very good coastal line. Then we have protection from the Himalayas. We have very good climatic conditions, monsoon, mineral, natural resources, flora and fauna. Then above all, the manpower, a very hard-working manpower. Despite all that, we have failed to realize our potential. And today, we find majority of the population is totally marginalized. We could have achieved these objectives. We could have realized our potential, provided this large population was not marginalized. No, Constitution had provided. As I said, Justice Bhagwati said that the structures of governance are needed. Now, in our Constitution, we did provide 4 political institutions: legislature, executive, judiciary, and press. I also believe press is a political institution because the Constitution itself has provided a status to the press. Where is the problem? Why we have failed? We have failed because there was lack of honest intention on the part of those who led these 4 institutions. And why this lack of honest intention? Because these institutions were never inclusive and pluralistic. Because these political institutions not being inclusive, not being pluralistic, what happened? Recently there was a book by 2 political economists, Why Nations Fail. They have analyzed non-pluralistic and non-inclusive political institutions lead to establishment of non-inclusive and extractive economic institutions. Lack of rule of law, lack of property rights, lack of competition in fact, in our country, in the name of pseudo-socialism, we had rather succeeded in achieving a crony capitalist type of capitalism rather than the pure form of capitalism which could give every citizen a right and opportunity for self-development. Then, because of this promotion of crony capitalism, of the worst form which we have seen in our country, the tendency for personal aggrandizement of those who are at the top in decision-making process has also developed. Again, I will come to Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. He had made this prophecy. I will say prophecy only because nobody knew what will happen after the Constitution comes into being, and exactly what has happened, he had already written. I just quote, on the social plane, we have in India a society based on the principle of graded inequality, which means elevation of some and degradation for others. On the economic plane, we have a society in which there are some who have immense wealth as against many who live in abject poverty. On the 26th January 1950, we are going to enter into a life of contradictions. In politics, we will have equality, and in social and economic life, we shall, by reason of our social and economic structure, continue to deny the principle of one man, one value. How long shall we continue to live this life of contradictions? How long shall we continue to deny equality in our society and economic life? If we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy in peril. Then there is another gentleman, we have heard of his name, Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer. what he had to say about this social justice, which we have failed to achieve in our country. He had written this book in 1980. In 1980, that is 36 years ago, he had written, social justice is virtually a casualty because of the backwardness and the backlog of the courts from top to bottom. A sense of accountability on the part of the judiciary is almost dead, and its credentials of competency, integrity, and democratic socialist commitment are on the decline. More judges, more salaries, and more flattery are the panaceas proposed. This is not me. These are not my words. These are the words of Justice P.R. Krishna Iyer, available in the book. He further said, the criteria for appointment of judges, the organs for selection and consultations before the choice is finalized, altogether ignore the first imperative of power in a republic like ours, namely the activist fidelity and ability to bear true faith and allegiance to the radical values of the Constitution, and the enormous people in penurious circumstances, in short, to the preamble and the robed man. Basically, the preamble to our Constitution should have been the mantra for our every decision making. And this preamble has been forgotten not only by judiciary, but everybody. All these four political institutions have fared in the same manner, have functioned in the same manner. Why? Again, coming back to Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, it seems to me that the aristocracy means a particular sections of society, that is the first three varnas of our four varna system. It seems to me that the aristocracy cannot escape the charge that its members have in them a class bias, a definite clannishness, a tendency to favor their own kindred, which makes them quite unworthy of being entrusted with power to decide the destiny of the masses. Why he said so? He further elaborated, what makes me so emphatic in my assertion that the aristocracy cannot be trusted with political power is because this he wrote in the context of his demand for separate electorate for depressed classes. So, cannot be trusted with political power is because the root notions of democracy, on the operation of which alone self-governing India can be safe for the masses, run counter to all the ideas which for thousands of years have formed and do form even today the common stock of their beliefs. We have seen so many programs. Right now, our Honorable Prime Minister is very vigorously pursuing all these new programs. Make in India, Digital India, Skill India, and he's trying very hard. In 70s, 80s also we had these programs, TRISEM. I remember I was in State Bank of India, and this training for youth for self-employment. Then there was EDP, Entrepreneurship Development Program. Then there was the DRI, Differential Rate of Interest. Then there was IRDP, Integrated Rural Development Program. So every government has been trying. But actually what happens? Where do we fail despite all these good intentions and good policies? Because in the subconscious mind, both at the individual and at the collective level, these caste prejudices affect decision making in all these political institutions. And not only that, they also lead to failure of all well-meaning initiatives when it comes to implementation. In his speech in 1930 at the All India Depressed Class Congress at Pune, what he had said, the power to administer law is not less important than the power to make laws. Oftentimes under pressure of work or under difficulties of circumstances, law has to leave a good deal of discretionary power in the hands of the head of the administrative departments. The welfare of the people must greatly depend upon how impartially this discretionary power is exercised. In a country like India, where the public service is almost exclusively manned by people of one community, there is a great danger of this vast discretionary power being abused for the aggrandizement of a class. The best antidote against it is to insist on a proper admixture of castes and creeds, including the depressed classes in the public services of the country. And when he said about public services, he meant judiciary also, not only this government executive. Despite all these framework, constitution, institutional arrangements, why we have failed? Only because of what I have just spoken to you. And surprisingly, and it is a pleasant surprise, the latest policy document, National Policy for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, 2015, acknowledges this. At page number 7, I will just read out this. Social and traditional view that sees status as being inversely proportional to the degree to which one works with one's hands. They are basically explaining the challenges before this for this skills development program. This can also be attributed to primeval and archaic ethos which compartmentalize the skilling landscape for several hundred years. This unfortunate legacy has no moral, ethical, and constitutional sanction in free India. Nonetheless, this gets at times manifested in norms, attitudes, and societal behavior. So this is the biggest challenge before this nation. We have all the intention. Fortunately, we have a prime minister who is well-meaning, determined, and he is not carrying the legacy of the past. Despite that, I have doubts because all these programs suffered at the time of actual implementation. And the reason I told you about this is, which has been mentioned in our policy document also. I told you about that book of Daron S. Moglu and James A. Robinson about that Why Nations Fail. 350-page book. They have devoted chapters to small countries. Very beautiful book. पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी की बहुत ही बेहतरीन किताब है. इकोनॉमिस्ट ने बहुत रिसर्च करके रिसर्च ऑफ डेकेड्स. India has been confined in this one paragraph. I will read it out. In India, institutional drift worked differently and led to development of a uniquely rigid hereditary caste system that limited the functioning of markets and the allocation of labor across occupations, much more severely than the feudal order in the medieval Europe. It also underpinned among strong form of absolutism under the Mughal rulers. Most European countries had similar systems in the Middle Ages. Modern Anglo-Saxon surnames such as Baker, Cooper, and Smith are direct descendants of hereditary occupational categories. Bakers baked, Coopers made barrels, and Smiths forged metals. But these categories were never as rigid as Indian caste distinctions and gradually became meaningless as predictors of a person's occupation. But in India, it still continues so. Though Indian merchants did trade throughout the Indian Ocean and a major textile industry developed, the caste system and the Mughal absolutism were serious impediments to the development of inclusive economic institutions in India. By the 19th century, things were even less hospitable for industrialization as India became an extractive colony of the English. Unfortunately, all these things which have been mentioned in our policy document by these economists and by Dr. Ambedkar are continuing. So, if we want to achieve our avowed objective of taking India to the top position in the Committee of Nations, we have to think about alternative methods, basically aiming at annihilation of the caste system. On 14th April in Talkadora Stadium, I had given a speech. You can go through. It is available on YouTube. If you type Narendra Kumar IS 1988, you will. I had given a roadmap how we can eliminate this caste system over a period of time. I had given this suggestion way back in 1998 also. But unfortunately, nobody is listening, nobody is thinking even in that direction. Rather, this caste is getting more and more and more involved in all spheres of decision making, whether it's social, political, or economic. Therefore, even the reassuring words of our Prime Minister in the preface of this policy document, where he says, "My brothers and sisters, having taken a resolve to enhance the skill development at a highly rapid pace, I want to accomplish this." His intentions are very good. I have had interactions with him twice. I was administrator of Daman Diu Dadra Nagar Haveli in 2011, and we sat together in Vigyan Bhavan during the National Development Council meeting. Then when I was in National Highway Authority of India, member administration, I had met him. When he was Chief Minister, I was looking after projects of Gujarat. He has a fire inside. He wants to take the country forward. But problem is this 1,000 years old. And nobody is talking about that, nobody is thinking about that, nobody is even having any intention to do away with this. And therefore, my only advice to all of you is to think about that, so that we ultimately succeed, because we have all the potential. And I would urge you not to see these programs as business opportunities, but you please view these as opportunity to transform India. Because if we can succeed in transforming India, we will succeed in any other objective. Thank you.